Hey everyone, it's your favorite duck who likes to talk finance. So last video I talked about the Roth IRA and why it was basically a cheat code for building tax-free wealth. If you haven't watched that one, I do recommend going to watch it, and the link will be right here. But today I want to answer a question that is often asked to me in the DMs on X or by various people throughout my life or just what I see on Reddit. Where does your money go first? The Roth IRA or the 401k? So I'm going to tell you exactly when the 401k makes sense or when the Roth IRA should come first and what I personally would do with my own money. And my situation is a little bit different than some folks, so I do caution you to stick around so you hear the different nuances and when and what is applicable to you. Also, if you're the type of person who likes personal finance content that's just straight to the point with no fluff, then I do recommend you subscribe to this channel. I'm trying to make more of these and I really enjoy doing them. And if you're not a beginner, then feel free to look at the description for the timestamp sections. They'll also be visible in the timeline on the YouTube video, so if you want to skip around to a specific topic, just absolutely go for it. But without further ado, let's get into this. Alright, so I want to explain the 401k briefly for those that aren't familiar. So a 401k is a retirement account that your employer sets up for you. So money comes right out of your paycheck. You don't even see it. That's actually one of the best points to this thing is that it's just automatic and it happens with every single paycheck. You don't have to remember to do anything. Now for 2026, the contribution limit for a 401k is $24,500, and that's way more than the $7,500 you get with the Roth IRA. There's also exceptions. For example, if you're 50 years or older, you can throw about $8,000 more on top of that. And if you're between 60 and 63, there's this new idea of a super catch-up that lets you add $11,250, and that came from the Secure 2.0 Act. So with the traditional 401k, your contributions are pre-tax, meaning every dollar you put in lowers your taxable income for that year. You don't pay taxes now, you pay taxes later when you pull it out during retirement. Every dollar you withdraw gets taxed at ordinary income at that point. That is a huge point to understand and to acknowledge. If you don't quite understand what I mean, let me give you an example. So say you make $100,000 a year and you can comfortably contribute about $20,000 to your 401k. So come tax season, the IRS does not even know that you made $100,000. They see the $80,000 because you sacked away the $20,000. It was never even taxed. That money, of course, is still yours. It's just sitting in a 401k that will continue to grow, hopefully over decades. But as far as the government is concerned, you only earned $80,000 that year, and that is a big deal, especially for high income earners in those higher tax brackets. And that's the opposite for the Roth IRA. With the Roth, you already pay taxes on the money going in, so it grows tax-free, and then you can pull it out tax-free. The government never touches it again. So the 401k gives you the tax break now, but you pay later, whereas the Roth IRA gives you nothing now, but then you'd never pay again. That's the trade-off this entire video is about and what we're going to go into. Oh, and there's also something called a Roth 401k, but I'll get to that because it changes the dynamic a little bit for some folks. Okay, so rule number one. If your employer offers a 401k match, that comes first before all, including the Roth IRA. I would even go as far as to say before your emergency savings. This is not debatable. An employer match is completely free money. If your company says we'll match 50 cents on the dollar up to 6% of your salary and you're not contributing at least that 6%, you are literally taking money and burning it. That's an instant guaranteed 50% return on your investment. You will not get that kind of performance from the market. That is insane. All right, so now you've funded enough to the 401k to get your match. Now this is where most people should likely switch to the Roth IRA. And I covered this in depth in my last video, so I'm not going to repeat everything. I would just suggest to go watch that one for the full breakdown. But the short version is this. If you're young and your income is on the lower side, meaning you're in a lower tax bracket, the Roth IRA is an insane benefit. So here's the awesome part, right? So when you pull it out during retirement, the IRS doesn't see any of it. Doesn't count as income, doesn't affect your Social Security taxes, doesn't bump your Medicare premiums. It is invisible. I called it ghost money in my last video, and I still stand by this. So the limit for 2026 is $7,500. I would say max this out if you are in a lower tax bracket. Pick something trivial and easy like VOO and just let it ride until you retire. And remember, while I wouldn't advise it, you can pull out your contributions at any time with no penalty, not the growth though. So just what you put in. So it's not like the money is totally locked away. That flexibility can be a big factor for some folks thinking through this. So to recap, for most people, the order should go like this: 401k up to the match, then the Roth IRA, then come back to the 401k for more. That's typically the go-to play. So once that Roth IRA is maxed, now you can come back to the 401k and start pushing more in. Why, right? Because that's $24,500 of tax-sheltered space. Hypothetically, if you're in the 24% bracket, that's almost $6,000 in tax savings just from contributing to this 401k. If you're in the 32% bracket, that's almost $8,000. That's real money you just get to keep and not send to Uncle Sam. And this is the part where I come in. I don't have an employer match, so you might be thinking, well, why even bother with this 401k mess? I thought that too for a second, but at my income level, the tax deduction alone makes it worth it. I'm maxing my 401k every year, not for a match, but because I can lower that taxable income, especially when you factor in income outside my 9 to 5, like dividends. That stuff adds up and it all gets taxed past my 9 to 5, so the more I can shelter through the 401k, the better. And by the way, I can absolutely do a video on why I choose dividends, especially as a younger individual, and how they're taxed at some point, but that's honestly a completely separate conversation. But the point is, $24,000 in deductions is not something I can get with another retirement vehicle. So is this the right move for everyone? Definitely not. Especially if you're somewhere in like the $45,000 range and your employer doesn't match, you're probably just better off maxing the Roth IRA and stopping there. The tax savings from a traditional 401k at that income aren't going to really change your life. But once your income starts climbing into the 22, the 24, the 32% brackets, that 401k deduction becomes a lot more attractive. And let me tell you, it's pretty nice lowering that taxable income on the W-2, especially when you start to file your taxes. One more thing that people don't actually know about the 401k, money in it is legally protected from creditors. So if you file for bankruptcy, they can't touch it. And of course, I hope this would never happen to anyone, especially if you're financially savvy enough to max out your 401k. But hey, life can happen, and this is just something for you to note. This is actually not true for other accounts. So for example, the Roth IRA has some protections as well, but it's capped at $1.5 million, and it also depends on what state you're in. Whereas the 401k is federal and unlimited. So this is just something to be aware of as you're making these decisions. Now let me talk about the Roth 401k because most people have no idea this exists, especially if it's not offered with their current employer. So a Roth 401k is basically like a mashup. You contribute after-tax dollars, so no upfront tax break, but your money grows tax-free and you pull it out tax-free in retirement. So it's the same idea as the Roth IRA, just inside an employer plan. So why would you use this instead of something like a Roth IRA? Well, I have two reasons for you. So one, there are no income limits. So if you make too much money to contribute to a Roth IRA directly and you don't feel comfortable doing the back door, you can still get some Roth treatment through the 401. Although I would advise against that because you would probably make more from tax savings in the now if you're a high income earner. So number two, the contribution limit is way higher than the Roth IRA. So that same cap of $24,500 versus the $7,500. You can even split between the traditional and the Roth 401k, but just remember they share the same cap. You can't do $24,500 in each, they just have that one that you can amount up to. Oh, and one specific call out, and this is brand new for 2026. If you're 50 years or older and you made over $150,000 in FICA wages last year, your catch-up contributions have to be in the Roth 401. So FICA wages, by the way, is basically just your W-2 income, the wages your employer reports for Social Security and Medicare taxes. So if that number was above $150,000 in 2025, any extra catch-up money, right, where you could do those catch-up contributions, can only be put into the Roth 401k. You can't do pre-tax on the catch-up portion anymore. Of course, your normal $24,500 contribution is still your choice, but that catch-up part, now the government somewhat decides for you. Now, if you're younger, this doesn't apply to you yet and probably won't apply to you, especially if you're more financially savvy and don't want to do those catch-up contributions. But it's good to know where things are headed, so you might as well understand how this thing works. So how do you pick between the traditional versus the Roth 401k contributions? Well, like I mentioned before, it really comes down to one thing. Do you think your tax rate is higher now, or will it be higher during retirement? So if your tax rate is higher now and you think it'll drop during your retirement, full on go traditional. Take that deduction while it's worth the most. That's what I do because I'm in a high tax bracket now. the deduction is just too good for me to pass up. I don't think I'm going to be withdrawing, $200,000+ per year from my 401k in the future. Therefore, my tax rate will be lower now. Now, if your tax rate is much lower now, like you're in the 30 to 45Ks, and that is where most people are early on in their careers, maybe you should seriously consider the Roth 401k. Pay the taxes while they're cheap, lock in the decades of free tax growth, withdrawal during retirement, and it's not counted as income. There's honestly a really strong case that tax rates in the United States are going to go up, like broadly across the board. The national debt is well over 100% of gross domestic product, and it is climbing, and Social Security Retirement Trust Fund is projected to run out by 2033. So someone has to pay for this, guys. And if you look at history, we're in a period of pretty low tax rates right now. So even if your income stays the same, your rate might go up anyway because the government raises rates across the board. That's why some financial advisors are telling people to get more money into the Roth accounts now while the rates are still low. It's basically a hedge against the future rates. And you don't have to go all in on one, of course. You can split your contributions. Do you have a big income year? Lean traditional for the deduction. Slower year? Maybe you can lean Roth. You can adjust it over time, whichever you feel most comfortable with. Like I mentioned, my personal strategy is the 401k traditional for the tax break. Then I do the backdoor Roth IRA on the side. So I've got money in both buckets, pre-tax and post-tax. And I've talked about this in my last video as well. So in retirement, I can pull from the 401k some years, pull from the Roth IRA other years, and actually manage my own tax bill instead of letting the IRS just dictate it for me. All right, so let's talk about what happens when you actually want to use this money at retirement, because the 401k has some rules that are very different from the Roth IRA, and a lot of people don't learn this stuff. Unfortunately, it's too late. So first, withdrawals from the traditional 401k, like I've mentioned a couple times now, are taxed as ordinary income during retirement. Every single dollar is. And it can hurt you in ways you don't necessarily expect. For example, they can make up 85% of your Social Security taxable, and they can trigger something called IRMAA, which is basically a supercharge on your Medicare premiums if your income is too high. So it's not just the income tax, it also cascades to other things. And this is the same point I made about the Roth IRA in the last video. Roth withdrawals don't count as income. They don't affect Social Security. They don't bump up Medicare. That's the ghost money thing again. Having both types of accounts is how you control stuff like this. Secondly, required minimum distributions. They're annoying. They're called RMDs. And with a traditional 401k, the government forces you to start pulling out at age 73. Now, if you were born in 1960 or later, it's 75 now. But point is, you don't just get to let it sit there. And if you don't take enough out, there's actually a penalty. And it's as high as 25% of whatever you should have withdrawn. 25%. That is absolutely brutal, man. Roth IRAs, of course, don't have the required minimum distributions ever. And now the Roth 401k doesn't either. Another reason to think about getting money into those Roth accounts. Now let's think about early withdrawals. If you pull money out of your 401k before 59.5, you're looking at a 10% penalty on top of regular income tax. Ouchies, right? But there are actually legit ways to get money out early without paying that penalty. There's the rule of 55, 72T distributions, Roth conversion ladders. These are real strategies that real people use, and I'm not going to go deep on these, and I'll definitely make a video about this in the future, so subscribe if you want to see that breakdown, because it can be a video I can make. So last thing I want to talk about are 401k fees. So your 401k likely has fees, and most people have zero idea what they're paying for when they log into that employer-sponsored 401k account. And these fees can show up as expense ratios on funds inside the plan, or administrative charges, or stuff just buried in fine print. And these fees can actually be very harmful. The Department of Labor has an example showing that just 1% of difference in fees can reduce your retirement balance by 28%. Over 30 or 40 years, that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And a lot of 401k plans put you into actively managed funds with expense ratios over 1% by default. Meanwhile, there might be an index fund in some plan charging 0.05%. And nobody told you to switch, you didn't really know where to look. Nobody's going to tell you, of course, you just have to go do it. So I would caution you, if you do have a traditional 401k, log into it and look at what you're invested in. Check the expense ratios on them. If you see anything above 0.5%, see if there's a cheaper option. You do this once and it saves you literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially compounded over time. This is actually one of the advantages of the Roth IRA, in my opinion. You can open it at any brokerage of your choice, Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard. You pick your own investments and you're not stuck with whatever weird menu of assorted options your employer gives you. You can buy VOO at that 0.03% and just be done with it. Some 401k plans are great, some are trash. Just know what you're paying for and look into it. All right, let me bring it all together here. So here's how to think about this depending on where you are. So if you're early career, you're lower income, your employer has a match, you should at least get to that employer match, then max out your Roth IRA. Then come back and fund the 401k as much as you can. And think about the Roth 401ks as well, since your tax rate is low right now. If you're mid to high career, you're higher income, your employer has a match, very similar order, right? You match first, you do the Roth IRA next, but for the 401k part, the traditional contributions probably make more sense because the tax deduction is worth more at the higher tax brackets. Now, if your income is too high for the Roth IRA at this stage, do the backdoor method, which I explained in my prior video. And if you're like me, higher income, no employer match, just max the damn traditional 401k for the tax shelter. Backdoor Roth IRA on the side. Money in both buckets. You prosper and you have two different ways to choose from during retirement. Point is, these options are not mutually exclusive. You don't do one without the other. It's about the order. Where your first dollar goes matters, and that depends on your income, especially as it changes and as you go throughout your career. It's something to keep in the mind as you reevaluate and reassess your situation. So that's all I got. Roth IRA versus 401k. So I started my Roth IRA month 1 after graduating, and that's still one of the best financial decisions I ever made. Granted, I also did not take advantage of my 401k employer match because I just didn't think about it. I got scared of the 401k being locked away. Whereas the Roth, I had that flexibility, and that's why I put more money into it. But now I'm maxing both. The 401k for the tax break, the backdoor Roth for the tax-free growth. It's really not that complicated once you see the why behind each one and when to make this decision. And like I said, there are legit ways to get your money out of the 401k early without getting hit with that penalty. And if you want me to make a video breaking that down, let me know in the comments. If enough people ask for it, maybe I'll make it. Drop a like if this video helped. Otherwise, I hope to see you in the next one. Peace!